Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Beverly Hills Cop, starring Eddie Murphy, John Ashton, Judge Reinhold, Ronnie Cox, and Stephen Burkhoff, directed by Martin Brest. Now, before I get into this, I saw this the first time not in theaters, but on HBO one night after another movie with Eddie Murphy was playing at the time, back in 2003. Can you guess the movie? Showtime, with him and Robert De Niro, but I'll talk about that maybe another day, but I remember going. I remember I saw this images from the Doctor Dolittle 2 DVD when I had it at the time. I don't have it anymore, but I remember the scene of a clip where Eddie Murphy goes, "You're not gonna fall for the banana in the tailpipe." Anyways, and then I decided to watch it on HBO after Showtime that one night back in 2003. So let's see if this still remains as funny as I remember from back then. Let's get into it. I like the opening of How Detroit Was Back in the 1980s, and the music was a good piece of music choice as we get Axel Foley, played by Eddie Murphy, selling some drugs to a couple of drug dealers who gave him $2,000 instead of the $5,000 one of them owes him, until the cops come in and ask for the ID cards, and the other drug dealer drives away while Axel is on the truck. And I also like the song that's going on during the scene, as the chase sequence is better here than any other chase scene that I'll go in the future. And after the other drug dealer escapes, Axel, is briefly arrested as he's recognized by a police officer, which is a great soundtrack and a great opening chase scene. Axel goes back to the police department as Jeffrey tries to warn him that Chief Todd, or Inspector Todd, is pissed as he's chewing Axel's ass off. And I love Axel in this movie, as he's the best thing about the movie. The theme song works great today as it did back in 1984. We'll see how that goes in the sequels. As Axel gets home and finds his best friend Mikey Tandino sitting in his apartment, and he laughs about it as his laugh is the greatest laugh in movie history. Let me demonstrate, for example. This movie is responsible for two of the greatest things in the movie history. One of them is the theme song, and two is Eddie Murphy's hysterical laugh, as I sometimes quote it to this day since I first saw this on HBO back in 2003, like I brought up earlier. Axel and Mikey have a good laugh at the bar while getting drunk, as it's the greatest first 15 minutes of the movie because of introducing Eddie Murphy as a Detroit police officer. His laugh in the theme song as they get home, which is just the greatest thing ever in movies, in my opinion. Axel is knocked out while Mikey gets shot in the apartment complex in Detroit. And that's when the plot starts to kick in, as Axel tells Inspector Todd that he wants to take his vacation while he wants to take some of the case from another cop that he believes is incompetent. Axel takes his vacation to Beverly Hills, as another great music choice in this movie is full of them is Stir It Up Now. I got to break it up now. Anyways, moving on. As Axel arrives at a hotel to stay at it, while he's there and checks in a suite and gets charged what was it? The single room rate after going on a rant with the hotel, which is a cliche thing to do, but it works here. Axel walks around Beverly Hills and sees a couple of guys with hysterical jumpsuits, and goes to an art gallery that Axel and Mikey knew back in the day, named Jenny Summers, who got Mikey a job with her boss, which I'm going to bring up in a second, as he talks to her about Mikey's death as he investigates it to get the man who's responsible for Mikey's death as his boss is Victor Maitland, played by Stephen Burkhoff. As he goes to his office and asks about what Mikey did for Victor, as Victor gets Axel thrown out of a window of his building, and the cops arrest him for getting thrown out of a fucking window, which is rather fucked up, and this movie is a hell of a lot of fun as it's very funny. Axel goes in a nice police office in Beverly Hills, and after he gets thrown out of jail, he chats with Sergeant Taggart, played by John Ashton, and Detective Billy Rosewood, played by Judge Reinhold, as they interrogate him, and at some point Taggart punches Axel in the stomach as Lieutenant Bogomil, played by Ronnie Cox, asks Axel questions about why he's in Beverly Hills, and his response repeatedly is he's on vacation, and Jenny bails him out, and while he's bailed out, he's followed by Taggart and Rosewood to his hotel, and while Axel and Jenny are in the room, Axel calls room service to deliver some food to Taggart and Rosewood, the followers, while Axel puts a banana in the tailpipe and their car as a distraction, which cracks me up to this day. And this dialogue in this movie is great and hilarious. Axel and Jenny investigate Victor's warehouse as the two guys driving a truck go to another warehouse, and Jenny takes Axel there as he goes off on his own in the other warehouse. Meanwhile, Taggart and Rosewood, chewed out by Lieutenant Bogomil, and sends them back to the hotel and waits for Axel while he pretends to play a security investigator, and is found and tells the supervisor the warehouse has the worst security in the nation, and investigates all the shipments, which was the funniest undercover moment of the film, as he's good at it. Axel goes to the hotel and scares the crap out of the cops. I did that once. Someone I knew wasn't thrilled about it. And talks to the cops and goes to a strip bar and have a drink with the two cops and shows the coffee grinds while at the strip club, and see some suspicious men and arrest them rather too quickly, and perform they slowly become friends. But Billy admires him pretty quickly, and the sign that Eddie Murphy shows Taggart as the okay one like this is the iconic moment of the film, in my opinion. Taggart and Rosewood get off the Axel case and gives it to Foster and McCabe, as one guy is Caucasian and one is African American who sounds white, or Caucasian, let me rephrase it as. And it was hilarious when Axel points it out while at Victor's place. Axel follows Victor while Foster McCabe follows Axel as Axel is stopped by a green light and purposely pulls out on a red light and loses Foster and McCabe, which did crack me the fuck up. Axel follows Victor in this clubhouse where Victor has lunch, and Axel interrupts him as he wants to talk with Victor about Mikey's death and knows Victor is up to nothing good, and threatens to gets arrested again by the cops of Beverly Hills, and brings it up to Bogomil, Taggart, and Rosewood about his friend Mikey and other things Victor is up to and the little evidence he has on Victor. And the chief of Beverly Hills comes in and asks if it's the man who caused all the damages in Beverly Hills so far. And Axel mimics him as he can hear him, and Bogomil has no choice but to take Axel back to Detroit, as he'll be banned from Beverly Hills for good. And that scene is sort of a letdown for my critical eye, but let's move on. Victor comes by Jenny's art gallery as he's asking her some weird questions about Axel. Meanwhile, Rosewood tries to bring Axel to Detroit until he brings up something that will be evident enough and talks him into going after him, as he takes Jenny into it, as it was her idea to come with Axel and Rosewood, and as Axel brings her inside without Rosewood, as Rosewood sits in the car and Axel gets beat up and captured, and Jenny is taken to the Victor's house. And this is working very well, and kudos to director Martin Brest for directing this very well done, until he had to end his career with Geely, which I never seen, confessedly. I hear it's horrible. Rosewood comes in and saves Axel from getting killed, and Axel beats up the rest of the bad guys, and they go to Victor's house for a shootout, and eventually Taggart comes in and gets talked into going on the property, and Axel and Rosewood, as the shootout begins with machine guns, and the cops come to Victor's house, and there's a shitload of cops as Axel finds Jenny and Victor, and Axel getting shot by Victor and has Jenny hostage as Bogomil arrives behind Axel while Victor has a gun, and both Axel and Bogomil shoot Victor dead, and Jenny is unharmed as she gets off to Victor Victor, rather too quickly, and Taggart and Rosewood arrest two bad guys as the chief comes in, and Bogomil writes a report with a white lie, as that night Taggart and Rosewood watch Axel check out of the hotel before he leaves. Axel invites Taggart and Rosewood to have one more drink before Axel goes home. And the climax was great and fun, and it was back then, and it still is today. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 8.8 out of 10. The theme song is great. That other movies does repeat this, as it's not as memorable and good as being done by this movie. And the laugh Eddie Murphy makes throughout the movie is hysterical, as it's quotable and laughable, and I'll quote that at the end. I really do like the characters, as this movie is a hell of a lot of fun, as it's a fun time from the 1980s to today. The plot works very well, as this movie is hilarious, and kudos to director Martin Brest for making this movie as great and fun as it was back then, and it still is today. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and I will be back next time with Beverly Hills Cop 2. And until next time.